I am an ecological engineer. I design ecosystems. That's what I do for a living. That's what I've been doing for 25 years. That's why I am engaged in sustainability. As we go through my experience with sustainability, I want you to understand that perspective. I solve problems. I don't just measure things. The problems I solve are directed towards making things better. Everything is connected. The first axiom of sustainability. We've all seen the 3 pillars of sustainability. The Living Planet Index was just released 2 weeks ago by World Wildlife Fund, and they reframed the 3 pillars this way, where economic domain is nested within the social domain. There are no economic systems without social systems. The social system is nested within the ecological domain. There is no social system without the ecosystem. So when you consider it this way, there is no economic system outside of the social system or outside of the ecological system. They are intimately connected. And everything is changing. And that rate of change is accelerating. And finally, we're all in this together. We do not succeed alone, nor do we fail alone. We succeed or fail together. This is a fundamental principle of sustainability, that we are one planet and one humanity. The principles and criteria for the GRSB are incredibly well thought out. I've been working with sustainability initiatives for over 20 years, and I think this is one of the better systems I've ever seen. I love the framework of the hierarchy that you've outlined, and the principles that were discussed earlier today, I think, are spot on. Natural resources, people and community, animal health and well-being, food, efficiency, and innovation captures the framework that the Living Planet Index tried to communicate. That captured this sense that the ecosystem is a nested set of processes that are fully interdependent. I'm going to briefly explain to you how in the U.S. we've been working with a number of sustainability initiatives that parallel the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, so that perhaps you can see how the next step, regional global roundtables, could be initiated. I consider every one of the initiatives I work with to be compatible with this initiative in its framing. But many of them are local and regional, and they go a lot farther in identifying KPIs and implementation. I want you to see how that works, because they could be models for how you would implement further. These programs include U.S. dairy, U.S. pork, U.S. poultry and eggs, soybeans, peanuts, cotton, and rice. We all use this framework. This framework was developed this was derived from the United Nations FAO SAFA guidelines for continuous improvement. This is simple in its concept, and I want to make that clear, that many times we do not engage in sustainability initiatives because we hide behind complexity. Sustainability is not complex. It's just hard. It's like loving your neighbor, right? Loving your neighbor is not complex. It's just very hard to do. So what you have to consider is that sustainability is continuous improvement, which is common to the process that every human enterprise that is successful has been engaged in. This is not novel. It's just more broad than we usually think, because we're looking upstream and we're looking downstream of our supply chain, because everything is connected and everything is changing. And so we have to look more broadly to see more completely. We saw those definitions working out this morning. We define sustainability for the enterprise, define key performance indicators, and then select the metrics for those key performance indicators. We measure. We benchmark our key performance indicators, we set goals, we develop strategies to meet those goals, and then we implement. We implement the strategy, we measure, assess, and report the results publicly, because that's how we become legitimate, and then we adapt strategies to improve the outcomes. This process of defining, measuring, and implementing is common to all of the U.S. sustainability initiatives that we're working with that are national and regional in nature. Having a common framework like this allows us to talk to each other, allows us to work together. As with farmers in Brazil and around the world, there are no U.S. soybean farmers. There are U.S. farmers who grow soybeans, cotton, corn, and other things. I would suggest that all farmers, producers are that way. So having a system that is common across platforms reduces the difficulty of implementation because you're doing the same thing with each platform. We've identified a common set of criteria for our key performance indicators. Key performance indicators are the things we think we care about. In the jargon of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, those would be the things that you would measure for your principles. Key performance indicators are outcomes-based, and you've adopted that principle. Science-driven, you've adopted that. Technology-neutral, and transparent. We have unified key performance indicators across row crop production, indicated by field to market, National Pork Board, and we're working with aquaculture, and then U.S. poultry and eggs to do the same thing. So that imagine a list of key performance indicators across animal proteins in a region that all have some unification, so that we understand what we're measuring, why we're measuring, and why we're measuring it, how we measure it, how we report it, and how we improve it. That alignment is critical if you want to achieve efficiency in this process. Otherwise, what you end up with are competing processes, and competing processes equals failure. Let's talk about goals for a moment. This is an important issue that we had to struggle through over the last 5 years. Aspirational and strategic goals are part of vision, and I would submit to you that the criteria and principles that you've developed are aspirational and strategic goals. Those should be developed by multi-stakeholder initiatives like this. Tactical and operational goals are management goals. Those should be developed by the sector and the producers, not by multi-stakeholder initiatives. That dotted line is a brick wall that should define areas of responsibility and separate them. As long as the tactical and operational goals are responsive to the strategic goals, they belong to and are the business of the enterprise and not the multi-stakeholder initiative. And that is the way that we ensure that we keep from having KPIs that become practices. Nicole discussed that a little bit earlier with animal welfare, that the feedback kept coming down to practices. Those become operational and tactical goals, and we have to have them, and they should be reported and they should be transparent at the enterprise level, but they belong to the enterprise and not to the multi-stakeholder initiative to define. Let's talk about how we would implement those goals. If we have a metric from 0 to 100, and let's say 100 is good, we all know that there's a diminishing return on getting better. And we saw that a little bit earlier. We're struggling with this in the United States right now. So we benchmark a year, 2000, for a particular KPI. Where does standards fit into this? Where does continuous improvement fit? Continuous improvement obviously means moving along the curve, getting better. The challenge of that is that if we have a standard, that defines some minimum accepted performance level, and the minimum accepted performance level may indeed sever some people from the acceptable performance community that may say that you're not sustainable and anyone above that line is sustainable. But the challenge of a certification program becomes it doesn't induce continuous improvement. It doesn't incentivize it, because once you've met the standard, you're done. Or once you've met the standard, you've achieved, and there is little incentive to achieve more. Standards are good because we need minimum acceptable performance levels, but we also need continuous improvement. And I would submit to you that the continuous improvement model is the superior model. That standards are also necessary and valuable, but they must also speak to continuous improvement, or they are, in fact, not relevant. So if we set some sort of goals here, let's see this. See if you can see the line. My red line disappeared. That's okay. Let's assume that we have some performance level of soil erosion. Soil erosion is occurring at some level, and we want to improve it. Soybeans in the United States, for example, roughly we had 0.13 metric tons of soil loss per bushel of soil produced in the United States in 2010. If we want to reduce that by a certain amount, how do we go about doing that? If we work with just the best producers and give them the Gold Star certification, that will not move the curve. They will get a premium, but soil erosion doesn't decline. If we want to reduce soil erosion, statistically, it's just self-evident. We work out on the tail. We go out to the lowest producers, the lowest 20% performers, the highest eroding 20%, and we focus on them. And if we can improve their performance, we can move the curve. Moving the curve is what Jason Clay of the World Wildlife Fund says is the solution to sustainability metrics improvement in agriculture. Move the curve, don't move individual farmers. Move the curve by working with the entire sector to identify the worst performers and improve them, because the best performers are always going to get better. It's in their nature to get better. Move the curve. Work with the lowest 20% and make things better. Our common message now is that sustainability is not monometric. It's not a single thing. Multiple key performance indicators must be managed in order to ensure resiliency in our systems. There are trade-offs between key KPIs. We're going to explore those in just a moment. Decreasing one metric will increase another. It's inevitable because these things are all connected. Each organization must have a common set of criteria for prioritizing these key performance indicators. Now, shout out to me when I ask you, what's the leading key performance indicator for beef? What do I hear when I hear about beef sustainability key performance indicator? What's the one you hear the most about? Greenhouse gas. That's what I hear all the time. Let's look at that. I indicated that the Living Planet Index report was released a couple of weeks ago by WWF. If you haven't reviewed this, please do. Loss of biodiversity is the most immediate threat to the biosphere. That's clearly their message. Let's take a look at what that means. 39% of terrestrial life has been lost, if we measure it as species, in the last 40 years. 39%. I'm a freshwater ecologist and a hydrologist and engineer. I work in freshwater systems. 76% of freshwater species have been lost in the last 40 years. That's 3/4 of the freshwater species on our planet gone forever. 3/4 lost. 39% of marine species have been lost in the last 40 years. 39%. That's an incredible number. Of course, the message there is don't eat seafood, eat beef. So, what's the cause of that dramatic loss of biodiversity on the planet? 82% of the loss of biodiversity on the planet is due to overexploitation. That's having inadequate protein in Africa, therefore the bushmeat industry prevails. That's because of habitat destruction and habitat loss, land use conversion. Those three things, or if I'm European, those three things are what caused the loss causing this incredible impact on our planet, the death of our planet. Three things. Where's greenhouse gas in there? 7%. We could eradicate greenhouse gas emissions today by taking Lockheed Martin's fusion system and putting it in every power plant on the planet and in every train, every bus, every truck. And guess what? This would still be a problem. So if we want to stop the loss of biodiversity, what should be our first and biggest KPI? Yeah, it should be reduction of habitat, of land use conversion. And we talked about that in your principles discussion this morning. It's not that greenhouse gases aren't important. Of course they're important. But we have to have perspective about the range of things that matter, and those things are going to vary by location. But we must have a common vision about our goals and about our key performance indicators, and a move away from the simple notion of monometric sustainability. Greenhouse gases reduction will not make us sustainable. Feed sustainability. We heard discussion a little bit about that in the panel discussion this morning. In the United States, we've been working with all of our commodity food producers, corn, maize, wheat, soybeans, cotton, rice, potatoes, and now we're adding others, peanuts and others, in a multi-stakeholder initiative to identify key performance indicators and goals. It's an MSI, a multi-stakeholder initiative. How many of your organizations are involved in field to market? McDonald's is, Walmart is, Cargill, the World Wildlife Fund, Nature Conservancy. You see the alignment. These things align. And by the way, this presentation is freely available to you. Just contact Mona. She'll be happy to give it to you. If you're interested, you can use it as you see fit. Here's how we define sustainable agriculture with field to market. Meeting the needs of the present while improving the ability of future generations to meet their needs. We will never be done with that. We will never be done. This is the journey of continuous improvement. Increasing productivity to meet future demands, food, feed, fiber, and fuel from the land now, improving the environment, improving the social and economic well-being of agricultural communities, because everything is connected. The key environmental performance indicators that Field to Market has adopted for environmental are greenhouse gas, energy use, water use, land use, water quality, nutrient use, habitat, and biodiversity. These are our KPIs. We are benchmark measuring these at the nation level. We report that using a radar diagram to show multiple metrics and the impacts across multiple metrics. These are just 5 from our 2010 benchmark report for soybeans, benchmark to 2000 production processes using 5-year averages. And you see that soil erosion has reduced dramatically from 1984 to 2007, 2011. Soil erosion has reduced dramatically. Soil erosion has reduced along with greenhouse gas, land use, energy use, and water applied per bushel. This is an incredibly good story to tell, but this doesn't mean that U.S. soybeans are sustainable. This means that U.S. soybeans are becoming more sustainable. We will be done when we're dead. There is no end to this. Sustainability is about continuous improvement because the next problem may be disease control. Soybean rust could be a dominant threat to our producers, and we have to find a way to be sustainable with that production challenge. Sustainability is continuous improvement, looking at all the risks and opportunities in production. How do we figure out how to get better? We do pilot projects now to evaluate how to get better. This is in Crete, Nebraska, evaluating corn maize resource efficiency. Using that same approach, we evaluated the average of each of a number of farms in this region for greenhouse gas, irrigation, energy, soil, and land use. Then we evaluated the best performers, those are the blue dots, and the worst performers, the red dots. And what that gave us is that continuous improvement line. It showed us where along those metrics we can improve. And then we can learn from each of the producers in a region how to improve, because the practices that work in Crete, Nebraska are not going to work in Des Moines, Iowa necessarily. Maybe some are translatable, some maybe not, or in Brazil or in Argentina. So that is why it is important to have regional assessments. But this shows us where we can get better. Greenhouse gas emissions and energy use are pretty tight. Actually, greenhouse gases more so. But irrigation's all over the board. Soil erosion, we have a lot of room for improvement from our worst producer to our best producer in soil erosion. So this is how we're measuring and how we're improving across multiple metrics. We use life cycle assessment to determine what improvements are possible and at what cost. Life cycle assessments are a process of inventorying all the inputs and outputs that go into a process. For the National Pork Board, we evaluated greenhouse gases because that's what everyone cares about. And we evaluated that a serving of pork, a 12-ounce serving of pork, produces 2.48 pounds of CO2 equivalent. So we evaluated then where do those come from, because if you want to get better, you got to find out where the problem exists. And we found that the sow barn, the finishing barn, processing, packaging, retail, and consumption sectors of the supply chain, the value chain, all contributed to greenhouse gases, but most of it came in the finishing barn, and most of that was associated with feed inputs and manure outputs. So for pork in the United States, if you want to reduce greenhouse gases, you start working where the problem is. You work with feed inputs, feed efficiency, and manure outputs, manure management. Looking a little closer, if we look at the live animal production, manure, feed, and piglets, of course, is loss and mortality. We also evaluated production practices, including anesthesia, ractopamine, immunocastration, growth-promoting microbials, antimicrobials, preventative antimicrobials, PIN systems in entire males, or not castration, for greenhouse gases. And you can see that if we change practices, we change outcomes. If we no longer use antimicrobials as preventatives, we will increase greenhouse gas emissions. We did the same for water. Drinking water is really only a small part of the water footprint of pork. It's mostly coming from the feed, and we evaluated their impacts based upon practices too. This is how we can use science to tell us how to get better. So in conclusion, if we look at a number of just 3 metrics: greenhouse gas, energy, and water in the U.S. for animal production, improving feed effective feed utilization, conversion of feed into product, reduces the environmental metrics across the board. Feed conversion is the key, as well as manure management. Feed mixture optimization is absolutely critical in order to achieve this goal. Sustainability is not complicated, it's just hard. Thank you.